Hello and welcome to Beacon Pointe's Fiduciary Point of View webinar series. As a quick introduction, this is Doug Igel, the Director of Retirement Plan Services at Beacon Pointe Advisors. Beacon Pointe is a registered investment advisory firm located in Newport Beach, California that currently manages over $9 billion in assets. We'll be hosting a new Fiduciary Point of View webinar every 4 to 6 weeks on various topics pertaining to the defined contribution industry in both the for-profit 401k space as well as the not-for-profit 403b space. Our goal is to bring to light various topics for both our clients as well as the general plan sponsor community and bring in experts in their respective fields to educate and inform all those in attendance. Our topics are in 403b not-for-profit space, financial wellness, target dates, ERISA litigation. With that, here at Beacon Pointe, we speak with plan sponsors almost every day, and a recurring theme around this time of year is what can we as a plan sponsor do to help combat executive deferral limitations due to failing non-discrimination testing. Some options are to create a safe harbor plan or to do an enhanced education and communication strategy to boost employee participation and get deferral increases. Another option is to set up a non-qualified deferred compensation plan. As the name suggests, we consider each word. Non-qualified. The plan does not meet all the technical requirements imposed on a typical qualified plan. Deferred, where the employee's receipt of compensation is delayed into a future date. Compensation, where the employee can defer regular salary, bonus, or any other type of compensation. And plan. It's a non-qualified deferred compensation plan that can be established for only one individual or can be established for a large number of individuals that are selected in total discretion by the company. Our speaker today is Jamie Bosley from Prudential. Jamie has over 25 years of experience in the executive benefits industry. He's been instrumental in successfully developing non-qualified plans for both Fortune 1000 companies as well as emerging and middle market companies in a diverse business areas. Jamie is a CPA and graduated from the University of Southern California with a degree in accounting. I've had the pleasure of working with Jamie for over 10 years now and have entrusted him to set up a number of non-qualified plans for my clients. Jamie, thanks for joining us this morning. I know you have quite a bit to cover, so I'd like to turn the presentation over to you.
Great. Thank you, Doug. This is an introduction to non-qualified deferred compensation plans. Why do companies offer these plans? Really, as Doug mentioned, a lot of it has to do with the highly compensated individuals in corporate America and companies across the country that executives cannot oftentimes put enough money into their 401k plan, whether it's discrimination, testing, there are limits on the percentage of income that they can defer, and we're going to get to this in a minute, is really limiting them in their retirement years of what the qualified plans actually cover as a percentage of income. Again, companies are interested in these plans to provide for not only a deferral of income taxes to a future period and also restoring deferral opportunities limited by 401ks, and it also allows a company to attract, retain, and recruit their current executive management talent. So that's why companies are looking to provide these types of benefits. This slide here really is probably one of my favorite slides, explaining to companies and plan sponsors why a company would want to put a plan in. As we all know, most companies do not offer a pension plan anymore. Retirement income has shifted to the individual. And on this chart that was done by Aon a few years ago, if you look on the bottom, it's the compensation starting at $150,000, going on out to $350,000. We're assuming it's a 45-year-old that's deferring for 20 years. They're maxing out their qualified plan. You can see in the green shaded box, that is what Social Security as a percentage of your final average pay would be providing in retirement. We don't know what's going to happen to Social Security as we get older. You can see somebody making $150,000 a year. Social Security is going to cover about 15% of your final average pay. Your 401k plan will cover about another 35% to get you a little bit over 50%. But as you can see, as the income levels rise, going out to 350, and those executives that make even more money, the amount of money that's covered by qualified plan sources, whether it's Social Security or your 401k plan, really leaves this retirement savings gap, this space that you can see here. We're showing an 83% income replacement goal. That's what the Aon survey came up with. I would argue that in states such as New York, New Jersey, California, that have high state income taxes as well as high cost of living, that number is probably even greater than 83%, in my opinion. There is a very big gap that we have to cover. And how do companies do, or how do executives do that? Well, their company offers them the ability to defer on a tax-deferred basis. Again, you're not getting rid of income taxes. You're just deferring them to a later year, and you're allowing that money to grow tax-deferred, similar to a 401k plan. Non-qualified deferred comp plans really can solve that issue. Again, there are some limits under what you can or cannot do under a deferred compensation plan. 409 capital A governs what you can and cannot do in deferred comp plans. High level, you have to make your deferrals at the time before the earning period earns, and you also have to tell us when you want that money paid to you at some point in the future. To set up a plan, it really comes at very little cost to the company, and it can provide a significant benefit to the executives, and it helps the company, like we said earlier, attract, retain, and reward current executives. Why would somebody want to defer? This slide shows, again, a 45-year-old earning $20,000 a year for 20 years. They retired at age 65, and if they took a lump sum distribution when they reached age 65 and paid ordinary income taxes at 33%, again, we don't know where the tax rates are going to be, but let's assume 33%, they would walk away with a check of $522,000, and it's a 6% rate of return. If you try to do it on your own in your after-tax investing at the same time period at the end of 20 years, you can see that you're only investing $13,400, and that, again, is compounding at a 6% rate of return, but you have to pay taxes as you go through that every single year, so you'd end up with $430,000. So a benefit by deferring money, tax deferred over a 20-year period of roughly $21,000. You can make that money grow even more significant if you elect to take your distribution in retirement over a period of years. So you have that ability to do that when you make that initial election. That's why the power of deferral plans are so popular. Here we will give you some ideas on the differences between the 401k plan and a deferred compensation plan, and we'll go through these fairly quickly. Again, the deferred compensation plan is not governed by ERISA, and it is only available to a select group of management or highly compensated. There are no limitations on how much you can defer. Again, technically you could defer 100% of your income, but most companies from a plan design limit the base salary to about 70%. That is because you do have to pay FICA and Medicare, just like your 401k plan. And again, your 401k obviously is limited to $18,000. You get the $6,000 catch-up if you're 50 or older. Elections in a deferred compensation plan are irrevocable during that existing plan year. So it's not like the 401k plan where you can move it up or down and change it every pay period. Again, you have to make that election up front. It does stay in effect for the entire plan year. Withdrawals prior to age 59 and a half, again, if you're in a qualified plan, you get the 10% penalty. In a non-qualified deferred compensation plan, there is no scheduled penalty. As long as you've scheduled the money at a future date, you can take that money at any time, and you will be paid as you've elected, pay ordinary income tax at that point in time. A couple other things that, from a limitation on deferred compensation plan, is that you cannot roll it into an IRA. You cannot take it with you when you separate from the company. You cannot roll it into a new company's deferred comp plan if they have one. When you leave the company, you're going to get paid how you've elected. And then the main one, the two main points of a deferred compensation plan really are from a participant risk standpoint. The participants can have investment risk in both the 401k as well as the non-qualified deferred comp. The biggest one here is the participants are unsecured creditors of the company. So the IRS does mandate this. Companies will typically set up a rabbi trust to hold plan assets, which would allow the company to do as much as they can legally to secure those benefits for plan participants. You do have to be an unsecured creditor. There's really no way around that. If you're not an unsecured creditor, that means there's no substantial risk of forfeiture of the compensation, and at that point in time, it would become taxable income to the executive. Finally, the last 2 points here, benefit payments and funding assets. The company does not have to set aside assets to fund that liability. So again, we go back to it's not an ERISA plan. Most companies do set aside assets to hedge that liability, but the company has to carry that liability on the books. So you have both an asset and a liability, which is different than the qualified 401k plan, where that sits in a trust off the books and the company gets a deduction at that point in time. So that's the whole accounting thing that we, in working in concert with Doug, we walk through the finance team of how these work on the accounting side of things. So really, what does a company want to think about when they go through setting up a plan? They look at eligibility, who can participate, what types of compensation can be deferred, how are the deferrals allocated, does the company want to make a contribution, what investments, is it going to be funded, and what are the distribution options? So as we get through this, and we'll go through these fairly quickly, who can participate? Again, it's the highly compensated. Some companies in our book of business use the qualified plan limits of $120,000. Other companies will up that a little, say maybe everybody that makes base income of $150,000. But again, you, the company, can set that amount in that by compensation level, title, selected by management. You know, the CEO, he or she may want to pick certain people. So that's all the flexibility that these plans offer. As Doug mentioned earlier, what types of compensation can be deferred? Normally it's salary, bonus, commissions, LTIPs, we see a lot of that, director's fees, restricted stock units can defer those. We would talk through that's really more for a public company. So those are the types of sources. However you pay the people, we can record keep that, or record keepers are able to record keep those types of sources. Company contributions, this is up to the company. You don't have to make a match. Most companies tie it to whatever the match is in the 401k plan, if there is one. Vesting schedules, sign-on bonuses, a lot of things that you can do from a company standpoint if you want to make those kind of enhanced benefits, if you will, to this select group of management, or just keep them the same as everybody else and just make them whole from a match perspective. Will the plan be informally funded? We also do a survey every year in conjunction with plan sponsor. Most companies do fund their plan, and really the two most prevalent ways to do it are through corporate-owned life insurance or taxable securities. And this, again, is not a participant-driven decision. This is a corporate decision. It's really based on what finance, treasury, what they typically want to see from an accounting standpoint, because, again, these plans do have accounting implications that you've got to understand. So it's always good as you think about putting a plan in, or even if you do have a plan, always go back and look at the funding strategy over time, because that can change. And again, the first one there, the cash, the pay-as-you-go, that's an unfunded plan. We don't typically see those just because companies don't like unfunded liabilities. Investment options, again, if it's got a ticker symbol, it can be record kept. There is some interest in indexed rate plans, whether it's prime rate, Moody's, treasury rate. Those were very popular when deferred comp really started back in the 1990s. We don't see a lot of those fixed crediting rates anymore because they're hard to hedge, but we do still see them out there. From a participant standpoint, participants can reallocate as often as daily. Very similar as a participant, the look and feel of a 401k plan. And again, Doug and his team do a great job in monitoring the investments, and typically you'd want 10 to 20, similar to what you would offer in your 401k plan. Distributions, again, you have to make these in advance. There is a rule under 409A that you can change your distribution election, but it has to be done 12 months prior to when you would have received that distribution, and it has to be pushed out a minimum of 5 years. So again, we have a number of plan design options that we can go through in these features, whether it's lump sum, installments, and then specific events, whether it's a disability, change of control, separation from service. The two most common ways to account for these plans and from a plan setup is either plan year or account-based. Again, it's whatever the plan sponsor feels more comfortable with. I've kind of gone back and forth on this, and I'm more on the approach of a plan year. So every plan year, you can pick how you want your money distributed to you, whether you want it paid to you while you're still working. You're going to have a child go to college, say in 2020. You can have it in 4 installments, 5 installments, whatever you choose. and you can asset allocate that a certain way. Your next year, you can allocate it differently when you retire. The other approach is more of a bucket approach. Again, both are fine. Both allow the flexibility to an executive. From a record-keeping standpoint, all the leading providers out there should be able to record-keep either type of plan design. So when you're looking at this, whether it's if you have a current plan or if you're looking at setting up a plan, really I'll call it the state-of-the-art, what you want in a non-qualified deferred comp plan. You'd want a diverse array of investment choices. So again, conservative to aggressive. You may want to add some sector funds, some more sexy, I'll call it, investments than your 401k, because this group, again, is in theory more sophisticated investors, so you may want to give them that ability. The ability to control the timing of your distributions, that's a scheduled in service or a future year that you pick. Lump sum and installments, you want to offer that. And then informal funding, offering really the most tax efficient way to minimize plan costs as well as P&L costs. So those are four most important takeaways in setting up a plan. And also, if you do have a plan, you may want to go through an audit just to kind of look at what you currently have, make sure you've got the most flexible bells and whistles, and it's really doing what you're trying to accomplish. Like I mentioned earlier, we do this survey every year with conjunction with plan sponsor of our responders. When we have about 300 plus companies that respond, they're not only our clients but other vendors. We've got 77% offer a plan. This just kind of gives you what the participation rate is. It's roughly 45% across all the companies that responded. Again, a match will offer a higher participation rate. In this case, it's 54%. And I think down at the bottom right, the most important attributes for a provider is quality of the service team, the online experience, and then the consultative approach under 409A, as well as how non-qualified deferred compensation plans work. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of an overview for the non-qualified deferred compensation plans. Doug, I'll turn it back over to you. Again, trying to make sure we've gone over this fairly quickly. Again, any questions that anybody may have, Doug, I'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. So we do have a couple questions coming in. The first one, is there any particular industry that these plans make the most sense with?
Yeah, great question. There's not any one industry in particular that these make sense. So we see them across all industries. I would say that these plans are most prevalent in C corporations. You typically won't see these in partnerships or S corps or limited partnerships. And the reason for that is the taxation of it, because a company doesn't get to take the tax deduction for any compensation that is deferred. So it, in effect, raises the income taxes that a company would have to pay in a current year. So that's why partnerships typically don't like to pay any more in income taxes. I would say they're most prevalent and making the most sense for a corporate structure that is a C corporation.
Perfect. A couple more questions. Are you seeing more of an interest in these plans today, and if so, why?
We are seeing a lot of interest in a number of these plans. Part of the reason goes back to that second slide that we showed, where you have this retirement income gap. We really get a lot of questions or interest in plans about this time. People have filed their income taxes, they've paid their income taxes the middle of April, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm maxing out my 401k plan. What else is there? I'm getting killed on taxes. How do I combat that? Really, and that's where these executives are going to their employers and saying, what can we do? So we're getting a lot of interest and a lot of calls, questions about companies wanting to look into this type of program.
Perfect. I think we have time for just one last question. Have any of your clients or potential clients asked about potential lower tax rates and how it would affect them?
It's interesting. We have not received a lot of questions about the lowering of tax rates. Part of that, I think, has to do with kind of a wait-and-see approach. Companies think they don't know what's going to happen. I think they also believe that even if tax rates get lowered with this administration, they more than likely will go up in the future. So they're kind of treating it as, hey, you know what, we're just going to move forward, and if we're going to put a plan in, we're putting a plan in. We're not going to let the tax environment really guide or deter us one way or another. You know, these plans, I think, are here to stay. There's no legislation currently being discussed about changing of the taxation. How these plans are currently taxed, again, it just be whether it's from a participant side, whether the personal income tax rates go down and for how long, and then on the corporate side is how is the corporation being taxed, and that would affect the investment vehicle that they choose. Hopefully that answered your questions.
Perfect. Well, I think that brings us to a conclusion of our Beacon Pointe Fiduciary Point of View webinar. First off, I'd like to thank Jamie for joining us this morning and sharing all of his experience and insight on the use of non-qualified deferred compensation plans. On behalf of Beacon Pointe Advisors, this is Doug Igel, the Director of Beacon Pointe's Retirement Plan Services Group, and thank you all for joining. If you would like a copy of the presentation or have questions, you can reach us at bpawebinar@bpadvisors.com. Thanks again, and be on the lookout for the invite for the next Fiduciary Point of View webinar. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.